Every once in a while, on social media, I will see a new post where someone is talking about Christopher McCandless. For those unfamiliar, just very briefly, this was an individual in America who, after college, decided to get rid of all of his belongings, drive out west until his car broke down, burned what money he had, and lived on the road, homeless, for most of the rest of his life, intermittently staying here and there, hiking long distances, camping out, living in caves at times in Mexico, floating the Colorado River. And the culmination of these adventures was this trip to Alaska, which he had been saving up for, where he went into the Alaskan bush with a pretty limited backpack of things. He had a bag of rice with him and a .22 rifle and some basic equipment. And, there are spoilers here for anyone who has not read the book or seen the movie, but ultimately, he's living out this adventure alone in the Alaskan bush. The spring snowmelt comes, and the river floods and becomes much higher to cut off his escape, at least if he wants to go back the way he came to get out of the wilderness. He's living in this abandoned bus that had been sitting in the wilderness for a long time. It was used by hunters, I believe. Ultimately, he's trying to hunt. He's trying to survive, but he's running out of food. He eats these wild plants that he believes he's identified from an edible plants book that he has, but he made a mistake and ate some things that made him very sick, caused him to lose even more weight. He became very malnourished, ultimately starved to death alone in the wilderness. A book was written about him, and a movie was made about his life called Into the Wild. And every so often, this serves as a thing for people to argue about. I see posts about it on the internet where people like to criticize his decision-making, say that he was underprepared, he didn't know what he was doing. This retard, look at him, he went into the wilderness with completely inadequate supplies and equipment. He has no one to blame but himself. This is the thing that people say. And on the other hand, you also have people who have never given this any consideration for themselves whatsoever, but they've just read the book or seen the movie, and so they sort of just believe what the movie or the media is telling them about this. They don't really have any independent perspective of their own. So it's like you have the knee-jerk people who agree and the knee-jerk people who want to be contrarians and disagree. I think that it is telling when a man says something negative about Christopher McCandless, at least about his spirit overall and what he chose to do with his life. If you do not have the pull, or if you do not feel that same desire that he felt and acted on, then I think you're just a fundamentally different type of person to who I am, and we don't have much that we can relate on, and there's not much point in even talking to you. But if you're listening to me, it's likely that you do feel that. And so the question then becomes, do you act on that desire or not? A desire for adventure. There's a certain type of person who will be compelled to respond to what I'm saying now by saying something to the effect of, well, yes, respond to the call to adventure, but also do it in a smart way or be prepared or know what you're getting into. Those people cannot be trusted. People who talk like that, those people should just be beaten, I think, until they realize it. I think there's some mental errors or psychological errors that are made where actually the solution is just to beat them up until they realize their mistake. Because the issue is not that they're not thinking about it enough, it's that they're thinking about it too much. I think that Christopher McCandless was onto something. I think that the strength of his desire to pursue a certain call, let's say, was such that the questions that the mind raises were not going to stand in his way. He was very intelligent. He did very well in school. Everyone who knew him, even in his final years, spoke of him very highly and said he was extraordinarily intelligent. The issue is not that he was dumb, that he went into Alaska because he was just too stupid to understand the risks. I mean, it really, people who say that, it really is like, I think you're just asking for violence. Like, to say something like that of the dead, and particularly of a man who had more balls than you, is like it is such a crime to say that. I mean, I don't know if you incur negative like karma in the afterlife for saying things like that, but I really hope you do. The difference between you and Christopher McCandless is not that you were smart enough not to make the mistakes that he made. The difference is that you're a fucking coward. That's the difference. We can acknowledge this while simultaneously recognizing the mistakes he made. Yes, Christopher McCandless made some mistakes. If I were going to fuck off to Alaska right now, I'm very hesitant to say this because, I'm putting myself, I have no desire to be an armchair quarterback here. Personally, I probably would bring some different equipment. I'd probably bring a bigger gun. But also hindsight is 2020. And that's not how life works. Life is not like that. Life is just an adventure where you just go forward. You don't know what's coming next. There's something so fundamentally cowardly about focusing too much on retrospect and picking out details to criticize as a way of elevating yourself relative to someone else's mistakes. I would have never died in the wilderness. I wouldn't have been so stupid as to cut myself off on the other side of that river. I wouldn't have been so stupid as to bring 22, which he, by the way, killed a moose with. I wouldn't have been so stupid as to misidentify these plants. And do you hear yourself? And by the way, the people who say that stuff, even if and when they're correct, in the sense that they would not have been stupid in those specific ways, I promise you, they would have been stupid in other ways. And they would have made mistakes too, because that's a part of the experience of life. There's a certain type of person who kind of views everything as like a video game, where it's like if you die, you lost. And that is a condemnation of your decisions in life that led you to that. Or that if you end up in poverty, you lost. And that's a condemnation of your decisions. I mean, we all know people and probably have people in our families that are like this. That's a very shallow, limited, narrow way of looking at the world. And I understand why people look at it that way. If you're unwilling to assume the risk of possibly losing your life in the pursuit of something that you're seeking, then you have nothing to say on the matter that I'm interested in hearing. If you think the fact that Christopher McCandless lost his life means that he made the wrong decisions in life, again, in a big way, I'm not denying that there were, on a smaller or surface level, I'm not denying there were tactical decisions that were mistakes. But if you think that his desire to go out to the woods and live alone off the land, if you think, and his decision, importantly, to act on it, if you think that was foolish, naivete, if you think you would have made some better decision, that's just cope. That's just cope. Because you're afraid to live your life. You don't even want to be alive. Christopher McCandless wanted to be alive. And he was searching for that. Did he find it before the end? I don't know. That was a man on an adventure. So, as far as I'm concerned, he was in the arena. You weren't. You don't even want to be alive. You're just afraid to die.